Hi, my name is Kendall. I'm a chef local here to Charlottesville, Virginia. And for this Earth Day recipe, we're gonna take some beets and we're going to salt bake them in a crust that's made with a little bit of zest from orange and from lemon. And then after that's all finished and cooled down, we're gonna make a beet salad. All right, so to start this recipe, we're gonna start off with the beet itself. So I bought these beets at the store and they came with the greens attached. Always buy your beets with the greens attached if you can, because these greens are delicious, they're super nutritious, and they can be used in other recipes. So what I did was I went ahead and cut them off the beets. And then from here, I washed the beet, and then I'm gonna clean it up just a touch more by taking even more of that stem off. And I'm gonna take off just a little bit of the end of the beet as well. So I have just a little tail there. Set that aside. We're gonna go ahead and clean up the rest of these beets by once again just cutting off where the stem hits the beet itself and then taking off just a little bit of that root end. Now that I've cleaned up the beets for where they're gonna be for the salt baking process, I'm gonna pick up these little beet stems here, move them over with the beet greens, and I'm gonna focus on zesting the lemon and the orange now. So this is actually gonna be a blood orange that I'm using today. They have a little more acidity to them and their skin tends to be a little more perfumed, which is gonna be nice for the cooking process with that salt dough because that perfumed skin is what's gonna add a really nice smell and flavor to the beets during the cooking process. Zesting the orange, I'm doing my best to only take away the skin of the orange and none of that white pith. So using the grater, and it smells really nice. This is where all those essential oils are in the orange. Are gonna be stowed away in the skin. I'm gonna go over that with the lemon now. This particular lemon seems like the skin is maybe a little thinner than it was on the orange. So I'm just gonna have to be a little more gentle during the zesting process just so I don't knock any of that pith into the bowl. And the pith won't really harm you in any way. It's just a little bitter. And it's not really what we're going for in terms of flavor today. So if you get a little bit of pith in the bowl, it's not the worst thing that could happen, but just do your best to be gentle and be careful. Don't add too much pith. So knock that loose. So now I've went ahead and collected some of the zest from the orange and the lemon. Set the lemon and the orange aside, and we're actually gonna use these later on when we make our vinaigrette to dress our beet salad. So our next step here is we're gonna use some kosher salt. I'm gonna go ahead and add this to the bowl. And it's gonna look like a lot of kosher salt because it is a good bit of kosher salt. About 2 cups worth, I'd say. We're gonna go ahead and take our hand and we're gonna mix up the citrus zest in that salt. You should start to smell some of the oils of the citrus zest being expressed into the salt. And the salt itself will also start to change color. It'll pick up some of the yellow and some of the orange from the zest. Now after mixing up the zest and the salt, you can see some of the color from the zest has bled into the salt, which to me just says that I know that the flavor is finding its way into the salt, so that's a good thing. All right, next up we're gonna take some water, and we're gonna add enough water to the salt and the citrus that when we mix it up, it'll have a texture that's similar to wet sand. And we want this because we just want it to be pliable enough that when everything bakes together, the water will actually help the salt seal shut in the oven. And that'll trap all the steam that would typically come out of the beets. So the beets get to bake and they don't lose any of their moisture really. So they're gonna be super tender when it's time to make that beet salad. So something kind of like that. So now that we have our seasoned salt mixture here, I'm gonna add a little more salt to the bottom of our baking sheet. Just to get a foundation of salt for the salt roasting. Okay. Add a touch more water to this as well. Gonna make it nice and sandy again. All right, so now that we have that base of wet salt in the bottom of our baking sheet here, I'm gonna go ahead and add those beets. And then here comes the fun part where we're just gonna top them off with our citrus salts. And we wanna go ahead and pack that in and cover all the beets. It's important that we cover all the beets because our goal here is to trap in any of that steam that would try to escape during this process. So if that means you gotta make a little more citrus mix or a little more salt mix like I am right now, it's totally fine. It's probably better to use maybe even more salt than you think that you need, as opposed to going conservative on this and going a little less. And just really take your time to like pack that salt in and around the beets. What I like to do is I like to take the salt from the sides, move it to the top like this, and then I like to kind of move it around from the top. Just allow it to kind of fall over the beets. And then I take my fingers and I just kind of press it from there. So I think I need just a little more salt. All right, so at this point, I have taken that salt crust and I've domed it all around the beets here. So I'm pretty happy with where we're at right here. So when we get to this point here, we want to go ahead and pop these in an oven that's been preheated to 350 degrees. And we want to bake them for about an hour or so. And so what we're looking for here, when we're baking these to know that they're done, is we want to be able to take a toothpick and poke it through that salt, and we should be able to slide easily into that beet and back through without much resistance. Kind of like if you were to bake a cake. All right, now that the beets have cooked for an hour, I'm gonna take them out of the oven and set them on top of the stove to cool to room temperature. Then I'm gonna put them in the fridge to let them chill overnight. All right, so it's the next day. We've let the beets chill in the fridge overnight. We've taken them out and we're gonna set them over here to the side to let them warm up just a little bit for a few minutes. And while they're warming up, going to go ahead and make a vinaigrette that we're gonna use to dress them with. So to make that vinaigrette, I'm gonna start off by taking a little bit of fennel and slicing it thin on my mandolin, just into this bowl. And just enough that it's really for taste. There's not like a set amount of anything in this recipe. I think that's enough right there. To that, I'm gonna add a little bit of lemon juice and some of the juice of the blood orange, just from the zest that we used yesterday. So some of that lemon juice. And I went ahead and picked most of the seeds out before I started doing this. If you don't do that for any reason, you can use your hands to catch any seeds. Some of the juice from our blood orange as well. And I'm gonna use a little more blood orange juice than I did lemon, just because I like that balance of sweet and sour that it brings. Also, the color is really nice. Now we're gonna start building our vinaigrette. I'm gonna add a touch of spicy brown mustard, a little bit of fresh black pepper that I've ground, nice healthy pinch of salt as well. And we don't want to go too crazy with the salt because remember, we bake these beets in a salt crust. So this is just enough to kind of season the fennel and season the vinaigrette. I'm not really so worried about seasoning the beets here. A couple little chili flakes because I like some spice. This is something you can easily leave out if you're not really interested in having any spice. I have some toasted sunflower seeds here as well that I'm going to add for texture. And then now I'm going to take a spoon and just kind of incorporate all of our ingredients together. Until I have something that looks like this. Now to build the rest of the vinaigrette, I'm going to take some neutral oil, which is going to be canola in this case. Then I added a little bit of sesame oil too, just to bring that sesame flavor throughout in the actual salad. So I'm going to whisk that in very slowly, just to make sure that everything kind of stays nice and emulsified and incorporated here. I'm gonna go ahead and set my whisk aside. I'm gonna go ahead and open up these beets and take them out of their salt now. So to do that, I'm just gonna pick a soft spot in the salt because at this point, once it's cooled down, it's gonna be like a little salt shell for the beets. And when I take away that salt, it's gonna bake together like this in big chunks. It's kind of like unearthing some like little beet treasure or something like that, because they're just gonna be nestled in there really nicely in that salt. I'm gonna take my kitchen towel and wipe some of this extra salt off of our beets really quick. Okay. And then at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and cut the beets down to a size that I wanna eat them at. So I'm gonna have some of them, I'm gonna cut some of them into quarters, just to kind of get different sizes so that when I make the salad, I can have a couple different textures and sizes of beets to keep it like interesting when we eat it. That's what our beets look like. I'm gonna go ahead and fold them into the vinaigrette. Don't wanna do too much work, because I wouldn't wanna do anything that would smash up the beets too much. Just wanna kind of gently coat them in the dressing. And I like how they shimmer like this once they've been coated with the right amount of dressing. Now that I've dressed the beets, I'm gonna add some torn herbs that I had in my fridge. So I'm gonna take about a pinch of cilantro here, just kind of tear it with my hands, let some of the oils from the cilantro find their way into the bowl. And then these are fronds from that same fennel. And they're a little bitter. They kind of have a flavor that's similar to like maybe tarragon. And they're something that just match up really nicely with beets. They also look really pretty when they go into a salad. So I'm gonna add in a little bit of that. It also keeps us from wasting something that definitely should not be wasted. The whole fennel plant is edible, not just the bulb at the bottom there. So went ahead and added in some of those greens, just one more gentle stirring to make sure that all of our flavors get mixed in nicely. I'm gonna take my bowl here and just plate slowly into the bottom of the bowl. Take my time to make it all look pretty and presentable. They're really good. So this is my salt roasted beets that have been made into a beet salad with citrus and sesame vinaigrette. I hope you enjoy it. Happy Earth Day.